Hey all, today we're going to talk about while and do while loops, and there's only a small distinction between the two. So I'm going to show you a while loop first, then we're going to show you a do while loop, and I'll explain the very slight difference between the two. There's not a huge need for do while loops, they are slightly convenient some of the time. So pay attention to the while loops. Do while is a more of an edge case. So here's my use case. My use case is that I'm wanting to do a loop, right? I have some code that I'm wanting to execute over and over again, and I don't know how many times I'm going to need to execute that code. This is something like I don't know how many mobs there are on the map, and so I don't know how many of them there are going to be to display on the mini map. Or I'm not sure how many times I'm going to have to prompt the user for a response before they give me a valid response. And so I'm going to have to continue to ask them until I'm supplied with a correct response. This is a little bit different than a for loop. In a for loop, you know how many times it's going to execute. It's going to execute like say 10 times, or you're going to execute it once for every item in a list or something. That's what a for loop is good for. For a while loop, we're just saying, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how many times this is going to take, but we're going to do it till we get it. So, one of my primary interests in this is going to be in getting information out of a user. So, I'm going to import the java.util.scanner object. So, that's going to let me make a scanner object. So, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to make a scanner object that I'm going to call user input, which is going to be a new scanner object pointed at system.in. Oops. Let me rearrange that just slightly. Okay, so I've got my scanner object. Now, I want to be able to store the result from scanning somewhere, so I'm going to make a string that I'm going to call user input string that I'm just going to start off with nothing in it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to try to prompt the user over and over. So the syntax for a while loop is while, set of parentheses with a condition in it, and some brackets. So while this condition is satisfied, we're going to do the stuff in the brackets, and then after the condition isn't satisfied anymore, then we'll kick out. So the condition that I'm going to set is that the user has not correctly responded. So I'm going to start with user input string dot equals, and the thing I'm going to compare it to is yes. But I want this to execute not while the user has entered yes, but while the user hasn't entered yes. So I need to put an exclamation point at the beginning of that. What that does is that it negates this as a Boolean. Okay? And I also want to cover the case that they haven't answered no. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this guy, I'm going to paste that over here, and I'm going to put a no here. Okay. So now this is while the user input string is not equal to yes and the user input string is not equal to no, then we're going to do some stuff here. And so the question that I'm going to ask is system out print line, and we're going to ask, are you a meat popsicle? Okay, and then we're going to get the user's input. So we're going to do user input dot next line. So that's going to get the user's input, but we need to store that somewhere. So we need to store it in user input string. So we're going to get the response. That's going to be this next line thing. That's going to use user input to grab the next line. We're going to shove that into the user input string. And then based on the results, we're going to do something. So I'm going to say if the user input string dot equals yes, then we're going to go ahead and output, so we're going to do a system out print line, and we're going to write thanks for your affirmative response here. Okay, so in the case that they have not put in yes, we should do an else, and our else ought to contain a, let's just copy this guy. So we'll just copy this, and we'll put that we're going to thank them for their negative response. Okay, so let's try this out. So if we press run, we're getting, are we a meat popsicle? And we're going to say some garbage, some different garbage. We say yes with a capital Y, it doesn't work. If we say yes with a lowercase y, it does work. Let's run that again. And let's answer no with a lowercase n. That works. If we run it again and say n with a no with a capital N, it re-prompts us. So this is one of those like there's case insensitivity. So let's double check here. So I think when we're typing, we can just do equals ignoring case. And we can go ahead and replace all of our equals with equals ignoring case. And that'll sort out our case insensitivity here. So running this, now I can answer YES, and it'll tell me that I made an affirmative response. We can answer capital no. This doesn't, oops, I hit debug mode. This doesn't sort issues like yep, right? Because that's not yes. It's just not. So this is kind of a thing. You might look into the idea of like having a list of affirmative responses and a list or an array of affirmative responses and an array of negative responses, and then checking whether the user's string is in that list or not. This is a slightly bigger project and one I want you to take on your own. So for right now, I think I've got this basically working. Let's show you a quick do while loop. So I'm just going to take this guy and I'm going to comment him out. So we're just going to comment out the whole block here. Oops, it already gave me the other side. Okay, and I'm just going to add a quick comment above this to say this is as a while loop. Okay, so the difference between a while loop and a do while loop is that a do while loop is formatted a little differently. So a do while loop is formatted like this. And our condition goes in the while loop still. So I'm just going to grab our condition that we made before. I'm going to drop that into the while clause here. And then in the do clause, we're going to take our system out print line and this stuff. Okay, so what's the distinction? Well, the distinction is the do block always runs at least once. A while block may never run. And that's it. That's the whole distinction. So if you're trying to write a while loop and you want it to be sure that it's going to execute at least once, that's where a do comes in handy. Some languages, Python namely, doesn't even have a do while loop, so it's not the most crucial structure, but they can be really handy sometimes. So the difference is legitimately, does this run once for sure, or is there a possibility it might never run? You can always assure that it's going to run once by just taking these 2 lines of code and copying them up here above the while loop. That would ensure that it runs once. I think the do while loop structure, or the do while, is a convenient structure for that kind of thing, but it's not the end of the world if you don't use it. So this is fundamentally the difference. A while true loop is a thing that we use fairly often. So a while true loop is a purposeful infinite loop. Cases in which you have seen a while true loop are, you have certainly seen a while true loop in every video game you've ever played, right? There is an infinite loop there that's keeping the game up. And really the only thing that crashes the game is you going in and quitting, or the game itself running into an unrecoverable error and kind of spilling its guts, right? So you've run into these, you'll use these. These are incredibly important for being able to get user input, because we just don't know with user input how many times we're going to have to ask before we get an answer in the affirmative or in the negative, or at least a valid answer. That's what I've got for you guys on this one today. Thanks so much for listening. Catch you next time.